Hello friends, welcome back. Today we are going to go over all of the books that I read this autumn. Considering most of the books that I read, I do try to have vlogs for. I thought a seasonal wrap-up made the most sense for me. I plan to go over everything that I read. I'll give you a sentence or two, my rating, whether I would recommend it or not, but I won't go into in-depth detail on the books that have been featured in vlogs. This video is to mostly go over the books that didn't make it into vlogs. We will also go over some statistics and the superlatives for the season. First things first, here are my stats for the season. I have read 25 books in the last 3 months. I have read 9,534 pages, not too bad. And my average rating has been a 3.5. I'm pretty happy with my numbers overall. I would like to maybe cut down the number of borrowed books and try to read more from my shelves. It makes sense with spooky season that horror was my most read genre in autumn, with romance being a close second, which makes sense. I mean, that pretty much sums up my reading taste, especially with fantasy coming in a third. I would also like the read from before and new to me author to be about a 50-50 split, so that is something that I'm going to work towards for the next season. In September, I had a magical readathon vlog, and for that I read 2 books, the first being The Lost Story by Meg Schaefer. Absolutely loved this one. This is two boys' journey back to each other and back to a world that they thought they had lost forever. This is a lovely, romantic, magical fairy tale full of wonder and family and friendship, but also of loss. 5 stars. Highly recommend. I also read With a Vengeance by Riley Sager for this vlog. This follows a woman seeking revenge, inviting all of her enemies onto a train to reap the consequences of their actions. But her plans quickly derail when all of her guests start showing up dead one by one. This was decent, lots of twists and turns, very fast paced, but a bit unbelievable and uninteresting characters. 3 stars. I would definitely recommend some of Riley Sager's other works over this one. I read 2 other books in September that did not make it into vlogs, the first being A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. The story takes place entirely in a magical school called the Scholomance. This school is not like Hogwarts though. This school is a constant battleground. These students have to fight to survive every single day, and there is no leaving this school once you enter it until you graduate, where the senior class every year makes their way down to the very bottom of the school, which is the most dangerous level, and they have to try to escape. And if you escape, you graduate or die trying. We follow a junior named Elle, who is probably the most powerful student in the entire school, but no one knows the amount of power that she has. She does keep it on the down low because her power, her affinity, is of the dark variety. In order to give herself power, she has to take energy from living things around her, or just work out a bunch, I guess. The other character that we follow in this is named Orion. He is the most sought after ally in the entire school. He is a monster killing machine, but he tries his best to kind of stay out of the limelight. Not that that works, but he does try to kind of lay low. He's awkward and quiet, and he's really there just to kill monsters and save lives. Orion and Elle become unlikely friends through a series of accidents, assumptions, and Orion saving Elle's life multiple times to Elle's ever-growing annoyance. I definitely have mixed feelings on this one. It fell very middle of the road for me. There was a lot of stream of consciousness from Elle, which I did find to be a bit boring at times. A lot of it, I do understand, was necessary to kind of build this world and the magic system behind this school, but I don't know, some of it just felt a bit of a slog to me. I really liked Orion's character, but I don't know, Elle felt a little annoying at times. This was the book club for my guild, the Mindwalkers, in the Magical Readathon, and someone in the Discord mentioned that Elle was giving like Wednesday, the Jenna Ortega version, and that did help me kind of picture her that way. I can definitely see that, and it did kind of help me like her a little bit more. And I did appreciate the conversations around privilege. There are these groups outside of the school called enclaves, and that is kind of everyone's goal once you graduate, is to get into a good enclave, assuming you weren't already raised in that enclave and have a guaranteed spot. Of course, the enclave kids, the popular kids, do have it a lot easier, and sometimes they don't even realize it. Not only do they already have allies coming into the school, but being in positions of power, they are granted better opportunities and therefore just safer in general. Ellen and Ryan have this conversation about how often the underprivileged kids are getting attacked, like on a daily basis. And Orion is just dumbfounded because his enclave and his friends in the enclave get attacked a fraction of that. And there were a lot of conversations around that. So I did appreciate the topics of classism and privilege. And the premise sounded like something that I would absolutely love, but I don't know, it just didn't grip me. I'm undecided of whether I'm going to continue the series. The end of book 1 did kind of leave off on a little bit of a cliffhanger, which does make me want to pick up book 2 eventually, but I am not running to pick it up. I ended up giving this one 3.5 stars. I could recommend it to certain people, but it's not something that I'm going to widely recommend. The other book that I read in September was The Minders by John Marrs. This is part of his Dark Future series. In this, we follow 5 points of view. We followed the lives of the 5 people who have been chosen to become the Minders. Government officials have decided that instead of storing their dark, dirty secrets on computers, which are hackable, or in physical files that can be stolen or broken into, they find 5 people with specific perceptive and cognitive abilities, and they are going to train these people to become the ultimate anti-cyber terrorism weapons. Their plan is to take all of their information offline, destroy any physical evidence of it, and they are going to turn that information into genetic code and implant it into these chosen individuals' heads. This is going to give them time over the next 5 years to build this ultimate safe house for their records. And for the next 5 years, we follow these 5 characters as they have to leave their old lives behind and live in this constant state of vigilance and paranoia because anyone could be after the information in their head at any time. And of course, the worst case happens and someone does find out who these 5 individuals are and they are hunting them down one by one. And as exciting as that may sound, this really was just a character-driven story most of the time. We really just follow these 5 characters as they go about their lives trying to live a normal life, but also being on such high alert and not being able to get close to anyone, while also constantly struggling with all of this information that is in their head because they have access to all of this information that has been implanted into their head, and it is affecting some of the people more than others. And I think maybe because we do switch between these 5 perspectives so often that we never really dug into any one specific character. I never really felt connected to any of them. The last quarter was much more action-packed as these people did start getting hunted down. And I was intrigued to watch how everybody tried to avoid what they knew was coming for them. It was suspenseful, it was violent, it was really twisty, which I loved, but the first part was just a little bit of a slog. I also really enjoyed one of the mystery aspects of this. One of our characters had no memory of who she was, and it was interesting to watch her try to discover who she was and who she could trust, which in turn left us questioning who we could trust. And it was interesting following each of these people and seeing how differently they handled both the implant and just the stress of this life. John Marrs's imagination really is something else. I definitely enjoyed The One and The Passengers more than this one. And if you do happen to pick this one up and have not read The One or The Passengers, this definitely holds spoilers for both of those books, especially The Passengers. So definitely be sure to pick up The One and The Passengers before this one, or, just stop at The Passengers. Not that this one was bad. I did enjoy it, even though it's been my least favorite of John Marrs's so far. I gave it 3 stars. October was filled with some great spooky books. The first vlog was my hyped horror vlog. I read 2 books for this, the first being Mary by Nat Cassidy. Mary moves back to her hometown to take care of her aunt. Mary thinks she's going through menopause, but what is actually happening to her and this small town is far more sinister than she imagined. Haunting, horrific, atmospheric, an unreliable narrator with some grade A feminine rage. Adored this one. 5 stars. Absolutely recommend if you can handle some gore. I also read The Eyes Are the Best Part by Monica Kim. A young woman struggles with odd cravings surrounding her new boyfriend's eyes. Fever dreamy literary horror with that feminine rage. A little more character focused and slow paced than I was expecting, but still really enjoyed. 4 stars. Yes, recommend. The next 3 books I read were part of the Reading Witchy Books for a Week vlog, and the first book that I read for this was Slewfoot by Brom. This is a historical story about a witch and an awakened ancient being becoming besties while the entity is going through a bit of a identity crisis, and the woman is fighting the patriarchy. Gothic, atmospheric, good for her revenge, stunning. 5 stars. Oh yeah, recommend. I also read The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandana. This is a cozy found family romance filled with lovable characters and magic. This was adorable, really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. Yes, recommend. Lastly, I read The Year of the Witching by Alexis Henderson. This is a young adult, dark, magical tale where a young woman raised in a magic-hating cult tries not to bring about the rapture. Very autumnal, but just not for me. 2.5 stars. Maybe recommend, but not widely. Next, I read 2 of the scariest books on my TBR, the first being Pen Pal by Dathan Auerbach. This is a recollection of a man's childhood where he realizes that a lot of things that happened to him in his past were a lot more sinister than he thought. Chilling, dread, and paranoia inducing, and that ending? 4 stars. Definitely recommend. The other book was How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix. A brother and sister reconnect after the death of their parents as they fight not only each other, trying to figure out what to do with this house, but also the entity that is lurking the halls of this house in the form of a puppet. This was creepy, campy, a little over the top, but imaginative. I gave it 3.5 stars. Yeah, I would recommend it. The next 3 books I read for a vlog where I read books that take place on Halloween, or so I thought. The first book I read for this was The Haunted Forest Tour by James A. Moore and Jeff Strand. A forest full of monsters pops up out of nowhere, and we immediately decide to make it a tourist destination. Think Jurassic Park with vaguely described monsters, terribly written characters, and the cringiest big bad I have ever read. My first 1 star. No, absolutely do not recommend. I also read Clown in a Cornfield by Adam Cesar. A Midwest group of teens fight off killer clowns in this campy slasher filled with ageism, tradition, and grief. This was tense but fun, pretty graphic for a YA. I really enjoyed this. I gave it 4 stars. For a certain mood, I could definitely recommend this. Lastly, I read Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury. This is a classic following 2 boys as they uncover this dark, sinister secret around this traveling circus. This circus preys on people's desires, and it is up to these 2 boys to save the town while also resisting the temptation that the circus offers. Coming of age, flowery prose, the power of family, friendship, and love. 3.5 stars. Yes, even though I did personally struggle with the writing style. I also read 2 books that did not make it into vlogs in October, the first being The Pallbearers Club by Paul Tremblay. How to summarize this one? This is a story following a strange pair of unlikely friends through their decades-long friendship. This is written as our main character's memoir, where his friend finds it in the present day and is annotating and adding her own notes to it. So we are reading both Art's self-written memoir and Mercy's notations, and I thought this was such a unique way to kind of have both of our characters' viewpoints. Both the style of writing and the opinions of both characters were so vastly different, and I really enjoyed that Mercy's little buttons really broke up what could have been like a heavy slog just retelling of Art's life. We follow the life of Art Barbara. He is a scrawny outcast with scoliosis, and he is the creator of the Pallbearers Club. He wants nothing more than to get out of his hometown for college, and to do that, he needs some extracurricular activities on his resume. So he creates the Pallbearers Club. But what he doesn't expect to get out of this is a new friend. Mercy is a community college punk kid who likes taking photos with her Polaroid, especially at these funeral homes and of the dearly departed, which I find weird that no one finds weird. But whatever. Art and Mercy become really quick friends. They start hanging out every weekend until something a little unexplainable and strange happens with Mercy that really puts a rift in their relationship. But they do end up eventually reconnecting throughout various points in Art's life throughout the years. Art is a very unreliable narrator. We are always left questioning kind of who or possibly what Mercy is. Is Mercy's presence in Art's life diabolical, or is this just like a strange girl who Art needs someone to blame for the things that are happening in his life? It really honestly depends on which character you believe. Art as he's writing his memoir, or Mercy who is contradicting a lot of what Art is saying. And like most of Paul Tremblay's books, the ending isn't going to provide you with any of those answers. Also, like most Tremblay's, this was such a strange book. It is like vampire adjacent, but like a vampire story I've never read before. I did enjoy it, although it was kind of slow and confusing at points. It is stylistically more playful than the other Paul Tremblay books I've read, but it still manages to keep that sense of like tension and unease that I love from Paul Tremblay's books. I also just always love Paul Tremblay's writing. It's very meta and sometimes pretentious, but it is always steeped in this spookiness and uneasiness. I really did enjoy this one, but it is not one of my favorites from this author. I gave it 3.5 stars. I would recommend it if you like Paul Tremblay's work. The other book I read in October was We All Rot Eventually by Mia Ballard. This is a horror novella following an aspiring young actress who moves to LA looking for fame, but she ends up with something far more sinister, much darker than her ambition inside of her and driving her. I wanted a gory, thoughtful commentary on Hollywood, but this just did not connect with me. Although it was raining blood and guts, the violence just kind of felt meaningless. There were glimpses of that like lust for recognition, but I feel like this just shot right past anything meaningful and thoughtful with the super quick pace, and it just got covered with this senseless violence. And I'm all for violence. Don't get me wrong, like I love a gory story, but it has to feel like it is there for something. It is serving a purpose, and this just didn't feel like that. I did not like the main character, Alexa. I felt like I never knew why she was doing what she was doing. Her motivations just made no sense to me. The plot felt a bit random, and the writing was a little stiff and kind of uninteresting. There was some creepy imagery that I really liked, especially towards the end. The ending was interesting in theory with kind of what was happening to Alexa, but I feel like the execution of it fell a little flat and it still didn't quite make a lot of sense. This was also supposed to be set in 2005, but characters were constantly scrolling on their smartphones. These small inconsistencies were littered throughout the book, and because of that, and because I just never really cared about what I was reading, I ended up giving this 2 stars. I personally would not recommend this, but I have seen raving reviews from other readers, so if this sounds like something that you can enjoy, give it a try. November was a very romance-heavy month for me. The first vlog that I did was a dark romance vlog. I read 3 books for that, the first being Den of Vipers by K.A. Knight. 4 mafia bros kidnap a woman to pay off the debt that her father owes, but she ends up turning their life upside down when they realize that she becomes someone that they cannot live without. This is reverse harem, touch her and die, and she's not like other girls. 2.5 stars. Decent, but probably wouldn't recommend it. I also read Haunting Adeline by H.D. Carlton. A woman's life is thrown into upheaval when she starts getting stalked by a dark vigilante hacker who thinks he knows what is better for her, and he knows what she wants better than she does. Turns out, non-consent, not for me. 2.5 stars. I wouldn't recommend it. Lastly, I read Lights Out by Nevessa Allen. A trauma nurse's fantasies come true after the man that she has been ogling on TikTok decides to take her up on her offer to break into her house and have his way with her. Surprisingly heartfelt, but still sexy, deep, complex characters, obsessed, had me kicking my feet, 5 stars. 100% recommend. The next three books I read for my cozy romance reading vlog, the first of which is The Pumpkin Spice Cafe by Lori Gilmore. This follows a city girl who moves to a small town to take over her aunt's coffee shop, where she falls for the loner farmer, solves a predictable mystery, and participates in numerous fall events. Definitely autumnal, but not as romantic, atmospheric, or cozy as I wanted it to be. It was a bit dull, to be honest. 2 stars. Would not recommend. I also read In the Weeds by B.K. Borison. A woman struggling to find her happiness again goes to the last place where she remembers having it. A quaint, cozy farm with a rugged but sweet and kind farmhand who cannot stop thinking about her since they first met and spent a weekend in bed together. Romantic, adorable, cozy, if not a bit forgettable. 4 stars. Yes, recommend. And lastly, I read You Again by Kate Goldbeck. An enemies to friends to lovers romance between a commitment-phobic, very promiscuous bisexual woman and a grumpy, hopeless romantic man who are both trying to heal after really bad breakups together. This was cute, but it felt a little immature. 3 stars. Maybe I could recommend. And the last vlog that I did for November actually hasn't come out yet. You were gonna see this before that one. So this is a little sneak peek of what you're gonna get next week. But I did finish these books in November, so I wanted to include them in my autumn wrap up. The first book that I read for this is Mate by Ali Hazelwood. This is an Omegaverse werewolf romance between a sarcastic asshole alpha and a trauma collecting hybrid who is literally dying for this man. Fun, spicy, trashy, with Ali's iconic humor and heartfelt characters. 4 stars. If you like werewolf romance or if you like Ali Hazelwood, definitely recommend. The next book I read was Hazelthorn by C.G. Drews. An autistic, lonely boy searches for answers in this botanical, gothic manner when his guardian ends up poisoned. The boy that he is supposed to hate, but is actually obsessed with, the same boy who tried to take his life 7 years ago, turns out to be just as ravaged inside as he is. Evander stumbles through the madness that follows his guardian's passing, untangling mysteries, uncovering long-buried secrets, and trying to survive the ever-growing fauna that is slithering closer and closer. Atmospheric, tragic, botanical body horror at its best, gorgeous poetic writing, a touch slow at parts, but so damn good. 4.5 stars, absolutely recommend. And lastly, Brigands and Bread Knives by Travis Baldree. We follow Fern as she ends up a traveling companion to the territory's most legendary adventurer after she sells her bookshop looking for more. And more finds her in the form of unlikely friends, forging these tremulous roads and facing challenges, both internally and physically, together. Found family, cozy, a journey of self-discovery, but still being lighthearted and full of humor. 4.5 stars, absolutely recommend. And that is actually it for November. I didn't get a chance to read anything that I didn't have featured in a vlog. Overall, quite a varied reading season. A couple of new favorites, some books that I kind of wish I wouldn't have read, and a lot of middle-of-the-road good books. Now let's get into some superlatives from the season. First, I'm going to go over the best book of each month. So for September, that was The Lost Story by Meg Schaefer. October was a little hard to choose, but I'm going to go with Slewfoot by Brom. And the best book of this month, November, is going to be Hazelthorn by C.G. Drews. But which of those 3 books took the top spot as the best book of the season? It's going to be Slewfoot by Brom. The best audiobook that I listened to this season was definitely Lights Out by Nevessa Allen. The audiobook was spectacular. And now that we've went through the best, we have to talk about the least best. The least best book that I read is a surprise to no one. It was The Haunted Forest Tour. What books will I be recommending most? For the horror genre, I think I'm going to go with Mary by Nat Cassidy over Slewfoot. I think Mary is a more widely recommendable book, even though I did like Slewfoot just a little bit more. And for romance, if you want something a little bit on the darker side, definitely Lights Out, obviously, by Nevessa Allen. But if you want something a little more PG, I would say probably In the Weeds by B.K. Borison. I can also see myself recommending The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Songu Mandana a lot in the future. The biggest surprise is honestly probably going to be Clown in a Cornfield by Adam Cesar. I was not expecting really anything from this. I had not heard great reviews, but this was such a pleasant surprise. I really enjoyed this one. On the other hand, the biggest disappointment was probably The Minders by John Mars. Like I mentioned, I really loved The One and The Passengers, which were in this same series, but The Minders was a bit of a letdown. The most beautiful cover has to go to Hazelthorn by C.G. Drews. Like, look at this stunning cover. The back, also stunning. Obsessed. Such a beautiful cover. And lastly, for my new favorite character, I can't choose just one. I can't. I'm going to give you my top 3 because I cannot choose. I cannot narrow it down to just one. So in the top 2 spots is probably going to be Josh and Allie from Lights Out. Both of these characters were just so heartfelt and had such tragic backstories. They were so funny and so real. I loved them so much. But my runner-up is going to be Lori in Hazelthorn. I loved our main character, Evander, so much, but I don't know, there was something about Lori that really hit me. But both of these boys were just so good, so good. And that is it for fall. Friends, thank you so much for watching. Let me know down in the comments what you think about the quarterly wrap-up. I think grouping it together as like a seasonal wrap-up versus every month is going to work the best for me, but let me know your thoughts. Let me know if you've read any of these books and what was your favorite read of fall. Or if you don't have much to say and just want to let me know that you were here, put some fall leaves in the comments to say goodbye to my favorite season, autumn. And while you're down there, don't forget to like the video if you liked it and subscribe if you want to see more from me in the future. I hope you had a great autumn. I hope you are loving what you were reading lately. Stay safe out there, and I will see you very soon for another video. Bye, friends.